A deep dive into lineup data 30-plus games into the season discovers that Walker Kessler still has major value. Kelly Olynyk has some interesting roles, and who plays well with Keyonte George. We touch on it all next as we continue on today's edition of Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Today, I dig in deep to lineup data and try to, well, that was really interesting on YouTube. I tried to show you my lineup data, and I put it up close enough that it acted as a green screen, and I disappear. It's kind of cool. Sorry about that. So I dig into lineup data. We're going to look at who just general on-off court, who we play well when they're on or off our court. Who are the front court combos that are working? What are the guard line combos that are working? And then we're going to look at Keyonte specifically. If there's anything we can learn on who does Keyonte play well and what are we learning about Keyonte. So that is the plan for today's show. It's certainly numbers-based. I'll try to make sure that inside the numbers I give you takeaways for you to leave with, so you're just not like sitting there going, whoa, I'm the Coyote in the Roadrunner cartoon, and there's all these numbers floating around. That's the goal. I am David Locke, the radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, certainly today, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you very much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. And to those of you that are out there as everydayers, you're awesome. I super appreciate you. It is greatly appreciated. We are free. We are available on all podcasting apps. We are on YouTube. Please subscribe. It's free on all of these things. And then obviously, if you can hit the bell button on YouTube and notify you for weeks like today when I kind of don't do the show at the regular time. I try to release a little before 8:30 every single time. And I apologize. This week's just been a little different. And hopefully it's all right. You guys are not on your regular work schedule, I'm presuming, but maybe you are. So if I screwed you up, I apologize. I want to thank you. We've hit 1,400 5-star reviews on Apple, which is kind of cool. And then, so, you know, just appreciate it. That's it. So, wanted to share that with you. All right, let's get into it. A little bit of this is off yesterday's show where I'm like, holy smokes, Will Hardy's got the hardest job in the world. We got 12 viable NBA players right now. So I broke it up. The middle group, Lauri, Ochai, Simone, Taylor Hendricks, I find really, really hard to kind of figure out what I was digging into. And so I actually didn't really dig into them. Just to give it to you, like, okay, we're 9 points per 100 possessions better when Lauri's on the floor than off the floor offensively. It's so dramatic. It's in the 93rd percentile. It's so dramatic that, frankly, all this data kind of has to go back to who's Lauri playing with and who's Lauri not playing with. Kelly Olynyk and Taylor Horton-Tucker are our next two most impactful offensive players. Our differential, our plus-minus differential is best when Taylor Horton-Tucker's on the floor. I know that's hard for a lot of you to take. Since he became the whooping boy of a lot of people out there. I'm definitely reacting a little bit too much to the vocal minority on that. I apologize. Though I would have to say I thought he became the whooping boy of some of the beat writers too. The +5 on offense, and we're 7 points better defensively when he's on the floor than off the floor, which is super interesting right now because he was out of the rotation the other night. Chris Dunn is having a massively positive impact. We're 9 points better when he's on the floor than off the floor. Equal distribution offensively and defensively, 4.5 in each direction. And then Lauri, we're even off defensively when he's on and off, and we're way better offensively when he's on 93rd percentile. Interestingly, by the way, Taylor Hendricks, and this is non-blowout minutes. This is cleaning the glass, non-blowout minutes. Taylor Hendricks comes in next. Then Ochai Agbaji, then Kelly Olynyk. And Kelly, we're much better offensively than we are defensively. Walker comes in at even, but we're much worse offensively, -6. Defensively, we're +7. That one, as we dig deeper today, we're going to see actually a lot of Walker Kessler value. Very encouraging, kind of what I found out defensively on Walker today. And so when I dig in, and the reason I'm doing this first, and again, this is what I'll try to do. I'm not going to try to over inundate you with numbers. I'm going to use numbers to give you some takeaways to have. That's why I like this stuff. And hopefully I'll be able to show it to you. So the first thing I'm going to show here is, okay, any numbers we talk about offensively, if Lauri's on the floor, it makes a huge difference. Any numbers we talk about, if Walker's on the floor defensively, it makes a huge difference. Taylor is actually having as big an impact defensively as Walker, which is a little surprising. And I don't think they've played a huge amount together. We'll take a look at that. And also just who are the best differential plus minus offensive players. You need to know that to context what we're about to go do after this. Simone's about even. Collins, a little better offensively and defensively and even overall. Jordan is we're a -2 with Jordan. And then we're just really not very good so far this year when John Collins, Keyonte George, or Omer Yurtseven's on the floor. We're minus 13. We're 13 points worse when John Collins is on the floor than off. We're 13 points worse when Keyonte's on the floor than off. And we're 14 points worse when Omer's on the floor than off. And it's on both sides of the floor. Okay. So that's the context of what we're going to start with. Let me start with just the center position. Because I think this has become a little clear that right now for the Jazz, we have I think we have 3 centers. Well, we have 4. We have Walker Kessler. We have John Collins. We have Lauri Markkanen, and we have Omer Yurtseven as our centers. And so let's look at them. Let's look at first Walker at center, John Collins off the floor. So this eliminates the John Collins Walker thing we tried, which while John Collins and Walker on the floor were -20 per 100 possessions. We're in the 3rd percentile offensively and the 5th percentile defensively. That's not a great combo. I think we may have to see it again just because of the way the roster is constructed. But I think there's a chance that we'll be able to avoid that. Here's a really encouraging note on Walker Kessler. When Walker's on the floor this year and John Collins is off the floor, we're plus 2.3. That's pretty great, by the way, because we're not plus 2.3 as a team, right? I guess that's probably the single biggest context piece I have not given here so far. For the season, and this is really your benchmark of anything you're talking about with us, for the season, we're -6. So if I talk about something in -6, then that's just about kind of even to where we are as a team all year long. That's a really important context piece for this conversation. Again, I understand I'm blitzing you with numbers. I'm going to try to give you takeaways and context to all of them. I somewhat pride myself on the ability to do this. So hopefully I do it well today for you. If not, I suck. All right. So on a team that's -6, when Walker Kessler's at center and John Collins is not at center, we're a plus 2.3. That is super encouraging. Walker doesn't look quite right. He's fumbling more balls. He looks a little less certain offensively. He's still having a massive impact defensively. We're a 109.5 when he's on the floor without John at center, which puts us at the 90th percentile. We're 92nd percentile against the shot. We're not fouling at all when he's on the floor. And yes, offensively, we're scuffling. We're in the 26th percentile. We're a good offensive rebounding team, but we're plus 2.3 on our team that's -6. That's great. Okay? So that's center 1. Center 2 is John Collins now. And so John Collins at center when Omer Yurtseven and Walker Kessler are off the floor, right? That is probably our best offensive lineup. And when John's at center, our offense, though, it's only been okay. It's in the 45th percentile. We're -7.8 with this. Defensively, we're in the 10th percentile. This is what the comment was about John Collins coming into the to the Jazz, what's out of Atlanta, is that he's the ultimate tweener. He's a brilliant roll man on the offensive side, so that his natural position is center, because he's a great roller on the pick and roll. He can get up above the rim with his incredible athleticism. He's able to shoot the three well enough to stretch, though nobody guards it, right? So it's not making a difference in spacing, but he does make it. He's making 40%. Give the guy credit. He's really improved that. It's been great. So he's a great offensive five. And if we start to look at some of John Collins' numbers at center, and we make sure that we include Lauri Markkanen on, because I talked about that earlier, that you like, if you're going to look at any of his numbers, you got to kind of really have Lauri on. Well, then our offense jumps into the 70th percentile to 118.5. Okay. So, right. So there's where John, this is kind of what we talked about with John in the offseason, that the reports I got from people is the ultimate tweener. And that is that he's so good offensively as a five. He sets great picks. He rolls. He shoots the three well enough that if they don't guard him, he makes it. He's making 40%. And then defensively, he's just not big enough to play the five and rim protect. And we're seeing that where defensive ratings are 120 when he's on the floor at the center. And so we're minus 7.8. But if you put Lauri on the floor, we're only minus 1.7. Again, for a team that's minus 6, that's pretty good, right? We're beginning to find combinations here that matter a little bit. It's kind of great. And then, as we talked about the other day, if you take Omer Yurtseven, Omer played really, really well, did great stuff, but he's not an NBA starting center at this point in his career. We're minus 15.5 when he played center. And then my favorite is Lauri. He's only played 50 possessions, 51.2 differential, 100th percent off offensively. I love it. I'm a fan. I think if we ever make the playoffs, you're going to see a lot of Lauri at center, is what I would really tell you. That would really probably be the biggest thing I would tell you, is that Lauri at center is going to be what we have to do if we play in a bunch of playoffs. All right. So that's interesting about the center. Then we dig into a few other notes here. And that is, let's start with just general combinations of players. And we're going to look at, as we continue on the show, we'll look at Walker and Lauri, John and Lauri, Walker, Kelly and Lauri, Lauri, Kelly and John, which is now starting. And then we'll get into the guard lines. We're just about finished with the front court. We're just getting started. We got the whole backcourt, and we got the interesting of, like, what does Keyonte play well with? Really revealing on that as well today on the program. So we've just gotten started. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope it's making sense. So our first takeaways, Walker's still massively impactful for this basketball team on the defensive end, and we can figure it out offensively, see where we go from there. I didn't actually, in fairness to Walker, by the way, and I'll do it when we come back, I didn't look at Walker with Lauri on the floor versus off the floor, which I probably should have. All right, we'll continue here with more on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by my good friends over at Intercap Lending. Steve Carter is the world's greatest, maybe customer service person ever. Intercap Lending is a Utah-based company, but it serves more than just Utah. So if you're outside of the state, listen to this because you're a Jazz fan and you need a loan, Intercap Lending would be great for you. Steve Carter can help you out. Steve Carter is our own personal loan officer. It's the single best customer service that I have ever been able to promise you ever. He's just the greatest. I just adore Steve Carter and what he brings to Locked On and what he's meant to us as a long now, but 6-7 year relationship. So a huge fan. He's done 2 of my loans. He's about to do a 3rd. He's done 2 for my COO of Locked On, Carl, who is hard to please. I'm hard to organize. Carl's hard to please. Would be the way I say it. And he has done an amazing job. The customer service stories are kind of never ending. If you kind of have listened to this, we keep getting them one after another. And right now is not the easiest time in the world to be in the loan business, to get a loan. So make sure you have someone great. Dave Thurman wrote, all I can say is Steve Carter is by far the best loan officer I've ever worked with. That is saying something because I've done my fair share of loans in my lifetime. That's universal. So let Steve Carter help you out at 385-800-8528 or email me at dlock09@gmail.com and we'll take care of you. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. That's intercaplending.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. What do you think Zion's going to do today? What do you think Lauri's going to do today? What do you think whoever it is in any other game you want to get involved in? That's the beauty and the fun of Prize Picks. Prize Picks. And with Locked On, you get the $100 deposit match with the promo code Locked On NBA. Prize Picks, it's daily fantasy sports made easy. PrizePicks.com says Locked On NBA first deposit match up to $100. You just pick more or less to 2 or 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Maybe I'll give you something today that gives you a little tidbit. You're like, ooh, I'm going to do that. Figure out what you think. The Memphis Grizzlies had 15 blocks the other night against the Pelicans. So maybe you're thinking something in the block range for the Utah Jazz tonight. I don't know. You figure it out. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy. It's Prize Picks. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Our good friend Holly Rose sits down with Frank Layden on the Front Row podcast. Catch all of her shows. She's had Ryan Smith, Will Hardy, others on. It's all at Jazz Plus. Plus, when you're done with this one, we'll take you over to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national 24/7 channel on YouTube for you to get all the latest on what's going on with sports. Get you ready for the big weekend. All right. I said I didn't do one thing, which I thought we were all excited about Walker. I gave the good notes on Walker when he is at center, without John Collins on the floor. We've been really good this year. The John Collins Walker combo just didn't work early in the year. Maybe it'll work again later in the year. Walker on the floor with Lauri, we're minus 1.4. Our offense is in the 32nd percentile. Our defense is in the 60th percentile. So Walker actually, weirdly enough, has been better when Lauri's off the floor than on, which means he's playing backup minutes, non-starter minutes. And that's where some of this on-off stuff can get a little complicated because it has to do with who you're playing and who you're not. And I also would tell you, on some of the on-floor, off-floor, particularly bench players, I've always said it's a sign of a good head coach. And I go back to Howell Neto. He always had the greatest plus-minus. It was because Quinn Snyder only put him in positions to succeed. The minute the matchup got bad, he just took him out. And that's really how you should use your bench guys. They should play, but then the minute like you suddenly have an undersized guy guarding Zion, like, oh, let's get him out and get the real guy in. And that'll help you out. That helps you out a lot too. All right, let's go to guard line. Chris Dunn is having a massive impact on the Jazz guard line. Our best we've got, of the guard combos, by the way, we have 10 of them that have played at least 40 minutes together. It's not a lot. I wanted to have Dunn and Clarkson in there together. They've played 40 minutes. It's actually not enough to make much of an evaluation. They're plus 27. I'm actually not sure that playing pairs have much value past like 100 minutes. You got to get so much noise in these. You got to be really careful. But that gets us to 6 of them. So Keyonte, we really have now kind of had 2 different things going on, by the way, at least in my opinion, where we are. We basically have 2 point guards. We have Keyonte George as a point guard, and we have Talen Horton-Tucker as a point guard. That's kind of how I view, and then we have Chris Dunn as a point guard. So we have 3 point guards on our roster right now. So let's just start there. If Keyonte's on the floor without Talen or without Chris Dunn, we're a minus 15.5. We're a 108.9 offensively, according to Clean the Glass, at the 13th percentile. And we're a 124.2 defensively in the 5th. Cleaning the Glass takes out garbage time. That's why I like it. Okay? So Keyonte's a minus 15.5 as our point guard. Again, Keyonte's a rookie. None of these things are evaluations of Keyonte in any way, shape, or form. If you're just wondering how the team is playing when he's on the floor, that's all that is. That is not an evaluation of Keyonte's future or anything of the sort. It is simply because rookies do not succeed in this league. Talen at point guard with Chris Dunn off the floor and Keyonte off the floor, okay? And we could dig, again, we kind of go back to a lot of this, and frankly, it matters if Lauri's on the floor offensively. When Taylor's on as our point guard, remember, we're -6 for the season. And Taylor's our point guard, we're plus 1.1. So 116.7, 58th percentile, and defensively 115.6, 52nd percentile. That's plus 1.1. Okay? And then lately, Chris Dunn is just having a massive impact on things. And so we look at Chris Dunn, and it's going to get a little funky because it's got the whole season in it, but we'll dig into it. Chris Dunn at point guard without Keyonte or Taylor, and we're minus 4.7. But we'll dig into this in a second. The offense is a 120.2, which is a 79th percentile. Let me just be perfectly clear for a second. There's not a chance I ever thought that our offense would be best with Chris Dunn at point guard, who does not shoot. And I never, for the life of me, thought our defense would be worse when Chris Dunn is on the floor at point guard. So there could be a sample size issue here with some of this that's a little crazy, because Chris Dunn's at 352 possessions at point guard without Keyonte or Taylor on the season. And it's so illogical what those numbers just say right there. So illogical that we're good offensively and terrible defensively does not totally vibe with me in a way that makes me feel comfortable making a lot of observations off that. Okay. Like, I do love my numbers, but there is a moment where the numbers just do not match the eye check at all. And so that's really interesting to me. Keyonte has played 1,044 possessions. Chris Dunn has played 352. Like, our sample sizes are just not fair. By the way, Keyonte with Lauri on the floor, instead of being minus 15.5, he's minus 5.6. It gets way better. The offense, instead of being in the 13th percentile at a 108.6, jumps up to a 116. The defense kind of stays not very good. But Lauri, we talked about this earlier. You got to kind of include, if you're going to look at numbers, you got to kind of include Lauri into the mix to understand where someone is offensively. And because we're just so much better when Lauri's on the floor. And we're a lot better when Kelly's on the floor too. And that has some impact. For Taylor, who actually has the ability to maybe create his own offense a little bit more, and sometimes both positively and negatively, we're actually less good when Lauri's on the floor, which is weird with Taylor. So just to be clear on that. And then final note on this, just to make sure that everyone understands the sizes. Keyonte's played 1,044 minutes as point guard without Taylor or Chris. Taylor's played 976, and Chris has played 352. So Keyonte and Taylor are pretty equal. Chris is a lot less. Now let's get into pairs. This is where some interesting stuff's going on with Chris Dunn, because now you get into who he's playing with. Chris Dunn with Keyonte or with Taylor's been really good. Okay? So that's interesting, right? You suddenly, all the things I just did were just dividing the 3-point guards. You go take Chris Dunn and you put him with Taylor Horton-Tucker. They've done it for 117 minutes. It's a decent amount. Plus 8.2. Chris Dunn with Keyonte George, plus 18. 76 minutes. A little less, but still interesting. Chris Dunn with Colin Sexton, which feels like it's working, is a minus 10.7. I got to tell you, the Chris Dunn numbers did not jive with me to anything that I'm seeing at all on the floor right now. I feel like Chris Dunn in the starting lineup has settled us, made us much more comfortable, made us play better, made us make better decisions, made us stay with possessions the whole way, like super positive. Now, we have not started games particularly well. The Lauri, Kelly, John Collins lineup that's starting with Chris Dunn and Colin Sexton, go back to the bigs, Lauri, Kelly, and John together, is really interesting. It's in the 97th percentile offensively. It's in the 2nd percentile defensively. It's a 126 in both regards. So unbelievable offense starting with Lauri, Kelly, and John, but it's horrendous defensively. That passes the eyeball test. Can't rebound very well. Our other guard line, again, remember -6 is our benchmark, right? So like the easy answer would be that you want things to be at 0, but -6 is our benchmark. 2 lineups that we insist cannot play together are fine. Taylor and Colin are -1.9 together. I know. -1.9 is pretty good when you're -6 as a team. Jordan and Collin are -3 together. I know. If you've been following it, I think all of us decided we'd seen enough of Taylor and Collin together, and I was utterly convinced you can't play Collin and Jordan together. I'm wrong. Keyonte and Jordan, which seems like a really good mix. You put the veteran with the rookie, is a -12.5. Taylor and Jordan is a -7.7. Chris Dunn and Colin Sexton's a -10.7. Keyonte and Sexton's a -5.1, which is better than our average. And then Taylor and Keyonte's a -12.7. Dunn and Clarkson are best, but they've only played 40 minutes together. But that's not surprising. They're the two veterans. All right, here's a wild one. I'll give it to you next. Another one that makes absolutely zero sense to anything that I know about basketball and what I'd expect with the Utah Jazz, which maybe tells you that the sample size on all this is way too small. Who knows? But I've got another one coming for you that makes absolutely zero sense to everything I know about basketball. And then we'll dig into who Keyonte plays well with. And it's interesting. It might tell us a little bit where he is in his development. It's time now for your eBay Motors Guaranteed Fantasy Fit. eBay Motors has the Guaranteed Fit. And Josh Lloyd is the #1 fantasy basketball expert in the world. Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd brings you his best fantasy picks of the week in the eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. He's going to start you off with Jaden Ivey. Monty Williams finally given minutes back to Ivey. He's delivered. Remains to be seen if Williams stays with that, as they're obviously struggling. Jalen Johnson is back in Atlanta. If someone in your league made a mistake and dropped him, make sure you go grab him from injury. Taurean Prince isn't spectacular, but the Lakers need shooting, and he's on a nice run as of late. Former Jazzman Dante Exum has Jason Kidd's faith and will be said to start when the Mavs are finally healthy again. Wow, bad loss by the Mavs last night, by the way. His shooting will regress, but his role continues to play well. He's a high percentage shooter. And then finally, Isaiah Hartenstein is starting in place of Mitchell Robinson, who's out for the season. That is Josh Lloyd's Fantasy Championship Tips. eBay Motors knows a fantasy team, and it's about each player being a perfect fit. It's same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts on your #1 ride or die, you can make your ride stay running smoothly. I was listening to Locked On Pelicans today. Jake Madison is refurbishing a 50-year-old car right now and using eBay Motors to get all of his parts, brake lights, LED, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs. eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride for the first time, every time, or money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at eBay Motors. eBay Motors, Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items apply. Thank you very much to Josh Lloyd and eBay Motors for the eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz today. Jazz are back home to play Miami on the 30th. That's a 3 o'clock start. Eastern Conference champs. And then Luka Doncic and the Mavericks are on the first. Tickets available at utahjazz.com. Make sure you grab those. Thank you very much. Locked On Pelicans, super good. He dives into all their problems. They've blown. What was my note today on the Pels? Where's it? Oh, it's in my other book. Let's see. My note on the Pels from listening to they're 9 of their 14 losses this year. They've been up by 10. There's something not quite off. I was going to do a whole thing on their build because it's super interesting. They get the first pick. They get Zion. They do a good job off Anthony Davis. They get Brandon Ingram. And they got Lonzo Ball. They're really actually a pretty interesting parallel to where we are. They got the #1 pick along the way. And they got this superstar in Zion, and then they went all in on CJ, and then they've had a great draft pick with Trey Jones, super draft pick with Trey Murphy, and it's still like really, really fascinating. So maybe we'll do that. Maybe tomorrow's show we'll look back at them because I do think they're really interesting. This got interesting. All right, here's the number that makes no sense to me at all. So I love everything about Chris Dunn. He's one of my favorite guys to be around. He just can't shoot, and they don't guard him. And so I was like, okay, you can't start Chris Dunn this year because then you can't play Walker and Chris Dunn together. Like that was my thought all year long. Well, we're not starting Walker now, so we're starting Chris Dunn. So, okay, makes sense. And I generally think that Will Hardy agrees with me because Chris Dunn this year has played almost, not all, but the majority of his possessions, Chris Dunn is playing without Walker on the floor. Like, it makes sense. Like, you've got to have Kelly Olynyk or somebody else at center, John Collins at center. I think Kelly's a 4, by the way, if you haven't figured that out. So Chris Dunn's played 673 possessions this year. And when John Collins is his center, they're minus 12.6. What? They're minus 12.6. It's for 208 possessions. He's played with John Collins as his center. And they're minus 12.6. I'm lost. When Omer Yurtseven is the center, just to get that out of the way, it's 99 possessions. It's a minus 3. And when Walker Kessler is at center and Chris Dunn is on the court, the Jazz are plus 20 in 262 possessions. So Chris Dunn's actually played more center minutes with and we're plus 20. We're in the 94th percentile offensively and the 99th percentile defensively. 99th percentile defensively makes sense. It's our 2 best defensive players. There's zero chance I ever thought this could work offensively. It's only been 262 possessions. But I think I would have needed a sample size of 50 possessions to tell me that wasn't going to work. So I don't know. Okay, let's go to Keyonte. Keyonte's minus whatever he is for the year, like 14, 15. With Keyonte and Walker on the floor, we're in the 0 percentile offensively. With Keyonte and Omar on the floor, we're in the 0 percentile offensively. That leads me to think that Keyonte is yet to understand how to play with a traditional big that rolls to the basket. Makes sense. Probably never did it in college. I actually talked to Taylor about this. Taylor was like, I never played with a rolling big in my life until I got to the NBA. Makes sense. They don't exist in college. Baylor didn't have one. He played 1 year in Baylor. You're not going to have him in the AAU. So he's probably never played with that kind of a lineup. With John Collins, who's also a rolling big, the offense is only in the 20th percentile. So when Keyonte's on the floor with Omer, the offense is a 97.1. When Keyonte's on the floor with Walker, it's a 102. And when he's on the floor with John Collins, who can pick or pop, it's a 110.6. In the very few minutes, and it's only 90 possessions, so it's not very much, that Kelly Olynyk has played center with nobody else and Keyonte's on the floor. Or with Lauri, you saw it the other night, the offensive rating jumps to a 128. At this stage in his development, these numbers would tell me that Keyonte George is much better with a pick and pop big, so the floor is wide open. He can just drive and play his game and find other people. Keyonte with Walker is in the 0 percentile. Without Walker is in the 19th, but there's the second level to it. And as I mentioned, with Lauri, you got to look at with Lauri, we're in the 51st percentile. So a lot of this comes back to, like, again, you've got to put Lauri on the floor because Keyonte's in the 10th percentile offensively until Lauri's on the floor. Then he's in the 51st percentile offensively. So a lot of this stuff we're all talking about goes back to what I talked about at the very beginning is if we have one top 100 player and if Lauri's on the floor, it really matters. So let's take Lauri, Walker, and Keyonte on the floor. When Walker and Keyonte are on the floor for the season, the offense is a 102. When Lauri's on the floor, it only jumps to a 103. When Keyonte has been on the floor and had Lauri at the center, it was 23 possessions. It was predominantly the other night, and it's golden. So just an interesting little observation on sometimes this data points can tell you maybe where a player is in their development. And the case of Keyonte, what I would tell you is I think it tells you that his case of development is he has not played with rolling bigs. Keyonte and Walker have only played 357 possessions together this year. Keyonte and Walker have only played, and actually, interestingly, Keontae's only played 38% of his minutes with Lauri due to injuries and some other things. So, and if Keontae's coming off the bench right now with Chris starting, then that's it. This is going to be something I think Will's going to have to try to deal with as the year goes on. You want Keyonte playing with Walker and Lauri. That lineup's not been good, And so how do you weigh that with trying to win basketball games? These are all fun things. I'm telling you, Will Hardy's got the hardest job in the world right now. I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully you got some takeaways. It's fun. Pelicans night, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum. We'll talk about it. Ron Boone and I will preview it for you, get you going. Thank you very much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz. I greatly appreciate you for tuning in. I hope you've had a happy holidays. I'll be back with you tomorrow. So enjoy yourself. And now we send you over to the first ever 24/7 YouTube national stream. It's called Locked On Sports Today. Hope you enjoy. Talk to you soon.